Thank you so much for joining us. That's Stephanie Kelton, Professor of Economics and Public Policy at the great Stony Brook University. This is Bloomberg.
We're a little over an hour away from the market open here in Australia and in Japan as well. Nikkei futures positive territory. Looks like we're heading for a softer opening here in Sydney, though. We'll have a closer look in a moment. This is Bloomberg.
Now, your 3-day weather forecast on Bloomberg 1130.
Cold front brings in plenty of clouds this evening. We'll start to clear out behind the front late tonight, low in the middle 50s. Becoming mostly sunny on Wednesday, breezy and cooler, high only 65 to 70. Clear Wednesday night, low in the middle to upper 40s. And sunshine for Thursday, high temperatures only getting up into the middle 60s. I'm Scott Kaplan with your 3-day weather forecast on Bloomberg 1130.
Missed your favorite show on Bloomberg 1130? Bloomberg Business Week, Masters in Business, Bloomberg Intelligence, and more are also available as podcasts. Listen today on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
Interactive Brokers clients earn up to 4.58% on their uninvested, instantly available cash balances. That's just one of the many reasons clients use Interactive Brokers to trade stocks, options, futures, currencies, bonds, funds, and more. Rates subject to change. Visit ibkr.com/interest rates to learn more. That's ibkr.com/interest rates.
The following conversation brought to you by Omega. 800-300-9ERC. That's 800-300-9372. OmegaTaxCredits.com.
I thought I couldn't get the ERC if I got the PPP loan.
Nope. If you're a business owner with 5 to 500 employees, you might be eligible.
I thought it was really difficult to apply for the ERC.
Not if you use Omega. The Omega is an accounting firm that has been around for over 15 years. They are a true accounting firm that will have a fiduciary relationship with you and your business, and they don't get paid until you get paid.
But I'm sure it takes forever to find out if you're eligible.
Again, no. If you call 800-300-9ERC, you could learn if you're a good candidate in less than 10 minutes.
I make a call that takes less than 10 minutes, and I can find out if my company is pre-qualified to receive a tax credit up to $26,000 per employee.
During the qualifying time frame, yes.
I'm checking out OmegaTaxCredits.com right now.
This conversation was voiced by actors that belong to a company that has already filed for their ERC.
May 23rd through the 25th, the Qatar Economic Forum powered by Bloomberg returns to Doha, convening voices that are spotlighting solutions to some of our most pressing global challenges. Speakers include CEOs from the Boeing Company, Miramax, VinFast, Blockchain.com, Sundance Institute, and more. Join over 500 international executives leading the conversations to put consumers and technology at the forefront and drive resilient economic growth into the next decade. Visit QatarEconomicForum.com to learn more.
Bloomberg Radio, on demand and in your podcast feed.
On the latest edition of the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast, a conversation with Marvin Lowe, State Street Senior Global Macro Strategist.
I still think that a recession is unfortunately somewhat unavoidable after the banking situation, and we're waiting for that to make its way through the economy. But the consumer is still strong, jobs are still robust based on the latest numbers, and inflation is proving sticky.
I look, Marvin, at the inflation proving sticky, and yet there's a single headline from Home Depot. Granted, it's a commodity. Granted, it's volatile. But lumber deflation. Are we going to see more headlines like that?
You know what? Probably. The good side of things has been a bit more volatile in this discussion. It does come down to services wages in this economy, and that's really where the Fed is focused on. And it is the stickiest of the sticky, if you will, parts of the inflation discussion.
But on a global basis, I looked at copper very carefully this morning. I looked at Newcastle coal in Australia, folks. This is north of Perth. And, I look at these commodities, and the fact is they're rolling over, indicative of a slowing China, maybe a misguess on the Pacific Rim. How do you fold that into your investment allocation at State Street?
Yeah, for sure, it is signs that you've got growth problems that are starting to emerge as we go through, the one-year anniversary of this aggressive tightening cycle within the developed markets. Those recessionary signals are all over the place. It is this kind of one slice of the American consumer that's making it harder to play.
Hear the full conversation on the latest edition of the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast. Subscribe on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Plus, listen anytime on the Bloomberg Business app and Bloomberg.com. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
6:55 on Wall Street. I'm Doug Krisner in New York, and we check markets for you throughout the day here on Bloomberg. We're looking at a weaker yen here at 136.40 against the greenback. We're about an hour and 5 minutes away now from trading in the Japanese equity market. Chicago Nikkei futures now about 50 points above where we were yesterday in the cash market. And later we'll get trading underway in Hong Kong. Keep your eyes on shares of Baidu. The ADRs jumped 4% in New York trading. The Chinese search engine reported revenue growth above estimates at 10%. And yesterday, Baidu shares in the Hong Kong session before the earnings were reported, stock was up 2.8%. Stateside, it was kind of an interesting day. We had both stock and bond prices moving lower, but focused very much on whether or not we're going to get a deal to raise the debt ceiling. A number of Fed members sounding speculative topics as well. That may have dampened enthusiasm for risk. Dow Industrial Average down 1% today. S&P 500 weaker by 0.6%. NASDAQ comp off about 0.2%. Yields up the curve as a result of those lower bond prices. The 2-year up by 7 basis points to 4.08%. Now, the bond market may have been pressured a bit by some new supply coming to market. Pfizer, in particular, doing a $31 billion debt sale, the fourth largest ever. Interest in the bonds did exceed $85 billion. We'll take another look at markets for you on the other side of the top of the hour. Time for the media review. Brian is in Hong Kong. Brian.
Yeah, that Pfizer deal really had my head spinning. $31 billion is extraordinary. We made quite a bit of Apple's $5.25 billion, and I think Facebook or Meta did a little more than $8 billion, but 31, it's astonishing. I guess there are some aspects to it that could change, having to do with the acquisition that they're doing of CGen, but it's still pretty amazing. All right, yeah, let's take a peek at some of the media stories here. I don't have all that much. We have one here from Reuters that UBS is slated to unconditional EU approval for its takeover of Credit Suisse. I think many people assumed that was afoot. From the Washington Post, Newsen, one of Argentina's biggest home appliance retailers, imports most of its products from China. Until now, it's always paid for all these fridges, TVs, and parts in U.S. dollars, the currency of international trade. But last month, as part of a bid to relieve pressure on Argentina's dollar-strapped economy, Newsen started doing something new, and that is to settle it in yuan. And then also have another story here, which we're looking at from the SCMP, that Taiwan has granted joint adoption rights to same-sex couples. It's another milestone in marriage equality on the island of Taiwan. The legislature passed an amendment to the Civil Code that makes the adoption process the same for all couples. And finally, from the Global Times, and this was having a look at the data that was announced yesterday in China. It was portrayed in the West as perhaps the recovery was stumbling, and the Global Times has really taken offense to this, saying that the April data rebuts claims of, quote, the economists in the West, and it's one of these stories where the Global Times has put a spin on it as how it was actually quite astonishing economic data that was reported. Just a minute here before the top of the hour. I'm Brian Curtis with Paul Allen. Paul, what are you watching?
Well, it was interesting today that President Biden won't be visiting Australia next week for the Quad meeting because of this ongoing wrangling over the debt ceiling in the U.S. But aside from that, he was meant to be visiting Papua New Guinea as well. He was going to be the first U.S. president to go to PNG, and he was supposed to sign a landmark security pact there. So no guesses as to which country that opens the door to in the Asia Pacific. So that's quite a big miss. Joe Biden not going to Papua New Guinea. A bit of a foreign policy win by default for China, Brian.
Yeah, that's the Global Times also championing that. The next hour of Bloomberg Daybreak Asia begins right now.
Live from the financial capital of the world, broadcasting across the globe, this is WBBR New York, Bloomberg 1130.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Asia for this Wednesday, May 17th in Hong Kong, Tuesday, May 16th in New York. Coming up this hour, U.S. equities fall as lawmakers struggle to hammer out a deal to raise the U.S. debt ceiling. Some Fed officials hint they may not be done hiking interest rates. And Baidu's quarterly revenue rose more than expected as ad sales benefited from China's reopening.
Debt ceiling talks end with a framework to negotiate. Both sides say they are still far apart and that default is not going to happen. Biden shortens his G7 trip to Asia. I'm Ed Baxter with Global News.
Inter Milan advances to the Champions League final over AC Milan. I'm Dan Schwartzman. I'll have that story and more coming up in Bloomberg Sports.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak Asia, on Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
It's a little past 8 in the morning in Tokyo. We'll have equities trading in about an hour from now, along with U.S. Treasuries. If you're joining from Japan or anywhere in the APAC, good morning. I'm Doug Krisner at the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Hour 2 of DBA. Let's get things started with a look at market action. Brian is in Hong Kong. Kind of a down day here in the U.S. What do you think is going to happen today where you are?
Tight ranges in the equity futures this morning, reflecting perhaps a little bit of caution in markets. Sensing index futures down 0.1%. FTSE China A50 is down about 0.25%. We have Nikkei futures suggesting perhaps a modest bump up at the open, and Australian futures are down about 0.5%. And looking at U.S. markets, which Doug referenced there, S&P E-minis now are up about 0.1%. The S&P 500 cash index was down about 0.2% during the regular session. Particularly the final minutes of trading, it seemed like a few rumors swept through that Washington lawmakers are not being able to find some common ground on the debt ceiling talks. We'll get more on that in our news coming up in a little while. Looking at currencies here, we've got the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index steady, dollar yen 136.40. We did have yields popping up across the board. The 2-year yield up to 4.08%. The 10-year jumping to 3.53%. We also have the 30-year bonds yield up to about 3.9%, and that's the highest since the banking turmoil back in March. Otherwise, a little bit steady as she goes, although we're pushing very close to 7 for the Chinese currency here. The offshore yuan, the CNH, is at 699.81. So we might actually tip over into 7 once the market gets opening today. And gold is at 1993.50. Doug, back to you.
All right, Brian, thanks. Well, here in the States, Fed officials kind of debated today what they will need to do in terms of hiking interest rates to lower inflation. The head of the Cleveland Fed, Loretta Mester, was saying the Fed has yet to reach a point where rates are sufficiently restrictive, and she's open to more rate hikes. At the same time, we heard from the head of the Richmond Fed. He is Tom Barkin. He's kind of open-minded about what to do at the June meeting, but he told us he's still kind of unconvinced or looking to be convinced that inflation has been defeated.
We're going to have a full month worth of data coming. You've got questions about the debt ceiling and what impact that might have. You've got questions about credit tightening and how significant that might be. So I think it gives you time and optionality to say either there's still more we need to do, so let's do more, or it's still okay to wait, and we'll wait a bit.
That is Tom Barkin, the head of the Richmond Fed. By the way, we had a couple of more Fed officials seeming to be a little less hawkish. One was the head of the New York Fed, John Williams. He was saying the Fed needs to first watch and gather feedback about the way the economy has been affected by the rate hikes that we have seen in the past. 500 basis points over 14 months. That's a lot. Also, Chicago Fed President Austin Goolsbee was saying it's simply too premature to talk about cutting rates next month. The Fed, by the way, will hold the next meeting June 13th and the 14th. Well, U.S. Treasury yields today feeling the pressure of some new corporate supply coming to market, that being a deal from Pfizer to sell $31 billion in corporate debt. The story from Bloomberg's Ann Cates.
The pharmaceutical giant is selling debt in 8 parts to help fund its purchase of biotechnology firm Seagen. It is set to be the 4th largest U.S. bond sale ever. Pfizer and its bankers are forced to modify terms of the deal on the